There's a particular kind of silence that follows survival. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of shock. When catastrophe becomes routine, the nervous system stops announcing it. It just adjusts. You've probably met someone like this. They don't flinch at bad news. They don't spiral when plans collapse. They respond to crisis with an eerie steadiness that feels almost inhuman. And maybe that's because part of them learned to stop being fully human a long time ago. Not broken, calibrated. Sign 1. They've become fluent in other people's suffering. Watch how quickly they decode your discomfort. A micro-expression you didn't know you made. A hesitation in your voice that lasted half a second. They caught it. They've been studying pain their entire life, and now they can read it like a second language. But fluency comes at a cost. You can't unlearn what suffering looks like once you've memorized every dialect. Sign 2. They've stopped expecting fairness. There's no indignation left when things go wrong. No, why me? Just a quiet recognition that randomness doesn't negotiate. Bad things happen to good people. Good things dissolve without warning. They've internalized this so deeply that injustice no longer registers as surprising. It registers as scheduled. Sign 3. Humor has become a weapon they've turned on themselves. The jokes are sharper than they should be, darker than the moment calls for. They'll laugh at their own collapse before anyone else gets the chance to. Not because it's funny, but because making it absurd makes it survivable. Every punchline is a small act of defiance against whatever tried to erase them. Sign 4. They've developed an allergy to being seen as fragile. Ask them how they're doing, and you'll get a performance. A smile that closes instead of opens. Reassurance that feels rehearsed. They've learned that vulnerability is a liability, so they've buried it beneath competence and deflection. Admitting struggle feels like proving their trauma right. So they don't. Sign 5. Their relationships exist in permanent contradiction. They'll drive across the state to help you move. They'll answer your 2 a.m. panic with patience, but ask them to need you back, and suddenly they're unreachable. Not because they don't care, because closeness has teeth. Intimacy, in their experience, has come with conditions. Love arrived with consequences, so their heart learned to want connection and fear it in the same breath. They crave what they've been conditioned to avoid. That's not confusion. That's survival memory. Sign 6. They've become strangely comfortable with disaster. New city. Fine. Job loss. Manageable. Entire foundation crumbling on a Wednesday afternoon? They'll handle it with the same energy someone else uses to reschedule a haircut. Not because they're fearless, because they've already lived through worse, and their brain has reclassified catastrophe as ordinary. The threat sensor still works. It's just been recalibrated so many times that nothing registers as exceptional anymore. Sign 7. Control has become their religion, practiced inconsistently. They'll agonize over which brand of cereal to buy, while remaining unbothered by existential uncertainty. They'll plan 7 backup routes to a casual coffee meetup, then shrug at career ambiguity. It's not irrational. It's strategic. The big chaos is beyond their reach, so they grip the small chaos with both hands. Micromanaging the controllable becomes a ritual that proves agency still exists, even if only in which mug they use. Sign 8. Hypervigilance has become their default operating system. They need to sit where they can see the exits. They scan rooms like they're cataloging threats. They've memorized the emotional temperature of every space they enter before anyone else notices the air has shifted. Their nervous system never fully powers down. It hums quietly in the background, always half expecting the floor to drop. Not paranoia. Pattern recognition trained by experience. Safety to them is a temporary state, not a permanent condition. Sign 9. They're grieving someone who still has a pulse. There's a version of themselves they used to be. Before the hyper-awareness, before the rehearsed conversations and preemptive goodbyes, before trusting became a risk assessment instead of a reflex, they missed the self that moved lightly through the world. The one who didn't treat silence like a code to crack. The one who laughed without checking who was listening. But that version doesn't exist anymore. And mourning someone who never died is a particular kind of lonely. What they don't tell you about going through too much is that recovery isn't linear. It's not even guaranteed. Some wounds don't close. They just become part of the architecture. The body learns to build around them. These people didn't choose resilience. It chose them. And now they're left navigating a world that thinks trauma has an expiration date, that healing has a finish line, that survival should eventually feel like victory. But it doesn't always. Sometimes survival just feels like continuing, and that's harder to romanticize. They've become experts at reassembling themselves with missing pieces, at functioning while fundamentally altered, at appearing whole while feeling perpetually under construction. And maybe the most unsettling part is how invisible it all is. They look fine. They sound fine. They show up. They perform. They laugh at the right moments. But beneath that, there's a version of reality running on a separate frequency. One where everything is slightly too sharp, too loud, too uncertain. Where the past isn't past. It's just waiting. So when you meet someone who seems too calm in chaos, too comfortable with uncertainty, too quick to minimize their own pain, know that you're not seeing strength. You're seeing adaptation. And adaptation doesn't ask if it's healthy. It only asks if it works. The question that remains is simpler than you'd think. Not how do they keep going, but what does it cost them to keep going? And would they even tell you if you asked? If something here made you pause, that's the point. Like if it hit, subscribe if you want to keep going deeper.